Hey, welcome to another exciting adventure in After Effects. We are going to work with green screen and maybe some motion tracking today. We're working on a green image right now. It's a camera raw image of Leah, one of the students in our class. She's going to be super happy that we're working on her image today.
No, she's not. No, she is not.
So before we get into After Effects and we start working this image, I've opened it up in Camera Raw in Photoshop. And one of the things that we've done is we've set the working color bit depth to 16 bits per channel. So you click down here on the bottom of the image where it says Adobe RGB 1998, 16-bit. We click on that and you just want to make sure that your bit depth is indeed set to 16 bits per channel. There are a whole bunch of other color spaces here that you can work with, but we're going to stick with Adobe RGB 1998, and we're going to go ahead and click OK. I did make some adjustments to this image already. I'm going to set it back to its defaults and just walk through this one more time. So what I was telling folks is that one of the things you want to do is you want to try to retain as much detail in your images as possible. And as you can see right now, we are clipping off our shadows pretty heavily in this image. So I'm going to push the exposure a little bit, and I'm going to increase the shadow black depth so that we can get some of the detail back in our shadow areas. And I'm also, you can see that it looks like we're losing a bit of data over here on these highlights on Leah's face. So I'm going to bring those highlights back down a little bit so that we can retain the detail on her face as well. And I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not clipping off any information on either side of this to retain as much detail as possible. So we're going to do that, just adjust a little bit there. Everything's looking pretty good. We might even pull just a little bit of contrast out of this, which will help retain lots of detail that we can always color grade back in once we're in After Effects. So this looks pretty good. Another thing that I'm going to do here real fast is I'm just going to crop this image down to only what I need. So I'm going to crop it down so that I don't have a bunch of extra pixels that I'm not going to need or use inside of After Effects. So I'm just using the crop tool that's right up here inside of Camera Raw. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit return. So now I've got the image cropped down so that it's just Leah on the green screen. We can see that there's good detail in the darker areas of the images and the light areas of the image, which is good. And now we're going to go ahead and open this image. And you should see it open up inside of After Effects, and it should say RGB 16 in the upper right-hand corner of your image. Yes, in Photoshop. RGB 16. So we're working in a 16-bit color space, which is what we want to do. It's going to give us a nice clean green key once we get into After Effects. You guys with me?
Just hold off a minute. One thing went wrong for me.
Okay. So we've got our image in Photoshop. We're really not going to do anything to the image here. We're just going to save it back out as a 16-bit PNG file so that we can bring it into After Effects and work with it from there. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to go to PNG, and then I'm going to go, and you should see Embed Color Profile Adobe RGB 1998. I do indeed want to do that, and I'm going to put this on the desktop in a new folder, and I'm going to name it my name underscore my first name underscore, I think this is what is assignment 6, A6 for the folder, and then I'm going to go ahead and name this image Leah Green Screen. And then it will save it out as a PNG. When I click save, it's going to ask me what I want to do with the file size. And I always leave this at large file size, fastest saving. This is basically an uncompressed image. So we're not losing any information in this image when we save it out as a PNG. Let's go ahead and click OK. And Photoshop will work to save this. And now it is saved, and we can close out of Photoshop. Don't save over your Camera Raw files, by the way. Don't do that. That's a bad thing to do. You want to keep those in their original format so you can play with them later. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open After Effects, and we're going to start playing with this image. All right, so we're not gonna create any new stuff quite yet. First thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna import that photo that we just created. So I'm gonna say import file. I'm gonna navigate to my desktop where my folder was. Randall Todd A6, there's my Leah green screen image, and I'm gonna go ahead and open that. So I've got my green screen image pulled in. You'll notice that in the upper left-hand corner it says trillions of colors non-interlaced, which is great. That's what we want. The other thing that you should do, if you see this says 8 BPC, let's change that to 16 BPC. So go ahead and click that, and that will bring up your project settings. And we want to work in 16-bit per channel. Click on the little thing that says 16 BPC on it. And we can actually change the working space too. So where this says working space, we can change this to Adobe RGB 1998. Then it perfectly matches the image that we are importing. So 16 bits per channel, Adobe RGB 1998. Let's go ahead and click OK. And then let's just take our Leah green screen image and drop that on a new composition. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the Leah green screen image and I'm dragging it down to this little icon right here that's going to make a new composition out of it for me. So it's created a new composition in the same size and resolution as the image that we imported. So the size of this composition is 2468 by 4612. That's the cropped image size that we have. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you do that one more time?
Yep, so all I did was just take the image and drop it on this little icon right here, and it creates the composition for you. Or you can also go like this. I believe you can take it and drop it over here, and it'll just make a new composition.
Drop it down to, not on the timeline, but to the left of the timeline.
Yes, you can also do that, and it will create a new composition for you. So we've got this new composition. I'm going to go ahead and tell it to fit the screen so that I can see what my image looks like. And obviously what we want to do here is we want to pull a key, and we want to get Leah separated on an alpha channel so that we can do cool stuff with her image and make something cool out of it. So let's start to work on that. So the plugin that we're going to use for doing our key work is called Keylight. So I'm going over into the effects and presets window, and I'm typing in key for Keylight, and then you'll see that there's a whole bunch of stuff under the keying tab, and Keylight 1.2 is in there. So let's go ahead and grab Keylight 1.2 and drop that onto Leah's image. And you should see the plugin pop up in the effects control box over on the left-hand side. Yep, just drag it and drop it onto Leah's image. So you should be seeing what I'm seeing right now. Is everybody with me? Okay. So let's kind of step through how Keylight works, right? So let's look at the View tab first. So right now we're looking at the final result of Keylight. So if we go ahead and we grab the screen color, let's do that real quick. So grab the little dropper and just grab the screen color behind Leah. And then the other thing that we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to toggle the transparency grid so that we can see the alpha channel behind Leah. So what we have right now looks pretty decent, but there's a lot that we can do to this to help it out and make it even better. So first thing I want to do is I want to step through these views with you. So final result, this allows you to look at the image in multiple different ways, right? So if I click on final result, that's showing us what the image looks like after Keylight has done all of its different processing levels. So the first thing we can do is we can set it to source, which will show us the original image with no Keylight processing on it. Source alpha shows us an alpha channel. If there's an alpha channel associated with our source image, there is not for ours, so we don't see anything here. Corrected source is if there's any like color correction or anything like that. Corrected source edges, this shows you kind of the edges that Keylight is creating when it's keying this image. Screen mat, this is one that we're going to use a lot. So the screen mat is what we're going to use to kind of determine what is keying and what is not keying. And so if I zoom in on this, you can see that there's some areas on Leah that are a little bit more gray, right? Like this area over here on her shirt. So if we set this to final result, you'll notice that we can actually see the pattern of the alpha channel bleeding through those areas in her shirt. So those are the kinds of things that we need to correct with Keylight and make sure that we pull a good, clean, solid key so that whatever video or photo that we're using is keyed properly. So I'm going to set this back to screen mat, and you'll notice that we have all those gray areas. So one of the things we need to do is we need to process this image to get rid of as much of that gray area stuff as possible and make the key as clean as possible. So we got screen mat, we got inside and outside masks, which we don't have any of those right now. We've got a combined mat, which is just another, honestly, this is one that I use very much. I believe that there's some, like, it basically takes some of the different matting options and combines them together to show you what your mat's gonna look like. Status is kind of a weird one, like it'll show you areas of bleed a little bit more definitively, so you can see that there's a lot of these areas on her shirt that are bleeding through to alpha, and that there's these areas in the back that are having issues as well. Intermediate result. This one I actually do use quite a bit. I like to, instead of setting this to final result, set it to intermediate result and then use a spill suppressor to suppress out any green spill that might be on the image. So there's the different views. So we can set this to final result again, and you should basically see what we started with. All right, so let's go back to our screen mat. So this is the thing that we want to kind of play with to make sure that we get a good key. And I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and I'm just using the middle mouse wheel to kind of zoom in and zoom out, and then I'm using the middle mouse button to drag the image around to look at different areas of it. Let's go ahead and save this too while we're at it. So I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to just save my project last name underscore first name underscore assignment 6 underscore 001 AEP. I'm going to save that so that I don't lose anything if it crashes or whatever. All right, so I'm in the screen mat mode, and I want to use the screen mat part of Keylight to help me work this key a little bit. So we've gone through the views. Let's step through. So screen color obviously grabs the screen color that we want to use. Screen gain allows you to like basically push the green color of the screen in the background, so you can use that to help or hurt the key. This isn't one that I play with too often. Sometimes I'll do just a little extra screen gain if things aren't working quite as well on the background color as I'd like them to, but this image should work pretty well, so I'm not really going to do anything with either screen gain or balance. D-spill bias and alpha bias, that's basically what colors it's going to be generating if it's having any issues on the edges. So if you see gray areas in your image or anything like that, you're seeing the D-spill bias and the alpha bias that are set to a neutral 50% gray. You can change those colors depending on your background to help your image sync better with your background. So if you have, like, say, a pink background, sometimes using that same pink color as the D-spill bias will help your image sink into the background a little bit better. Screen pre-blur. So you can actually pre-blur the green screen a little bit, which will help it key a little bit smoother. If you need to. This is a good high resolution image, so we probably won't need to play with that one too much at this time. If you're working on lower resolution footage, say like 720 or 1080p footage, that screen pre-blur can help out a bit. If you've got like debayering or any noise in the background or anything like that, it can help alleviate that a little bit. So then we've got the screen mat option. So let's open up the caret on screen mat, and you'll see that there's a bunch of parameters inside there that we can play with. The two that we're going to play with the most are clip black and clip white. So generally when you're working with any kind of green screen footage, you want to clip it as little as possible while maintaining as much detail in the image and the edges and the hair and all that kind of stuff as possible. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with the clip white. And what we're looking to do here is we're looking to get rid of these areas of gray in the image and make sure that that's a good solid white color. So I'm going to take the clip white and I'm going to set it to 90. And I think that that's probably going to get me where I need to be. I can probably back it off a little bit just to see if I can retain any more detail. So if I go to say like 95, if you see any of these gray areas start to pop back in, which they do a little bit over here on her arm, the other thing that we can do is we can check that status mode and set that back to 90, and you can see that it clips out a lot of those areas that were showing up as green screen. And it looks like I might need to go just a couple more ticks to get it looking pretty solid. So if I go back to my screen mat, this should be looking pretty good, and it is pretty much from top to bottom. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to do this with the black as well. You can see that down in her shoes there's a lot of gray areas that are left in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to leave that be, because we're going to work this mat additionally to get it to clean this stuff up a little bit more and pull a better key and get rid of all this crud basically on the bottom of the screen. All right, so I got my screen mat kind of dialed in. I'm going to clip the black out as well. I'm just going to set the clip black to 10, and that's going to get rid of a lot of the junk on the upper parts of my image that we care about. The feet and the lower part of the image are always tricky because anytime you're standing on the green screen, there's going to be shadows, there's going to be wrinkles, there's going to be spill on the shoes, stuff like that you're going to have to deal with. Go ahead, DeAndre.
I was actually going to ask you about that, like, before we made, like, the entire area black. Like, because I didn't see that part on your screen, but I saw it on mine, and I was going to ask you about it, like...
So this stuff down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a mat that we're going to use ultimately to key this image, where we're going to get rid of all that noise. The other thing that you can do is you can mask this stuff out too, but I've found that personally it works much better and cleaner to use a black and white mat to key an image like this. Number one, it's static, so it's easy to work with. You can easily go in and create the black and the white areas where you need them very quickly. And number two, for me, it's just worked really well to do that on any kind of images or footage that I'm green screening. A lot of this stuff is going to be context dependent. Like, it's going to depend on the shot. It's going to depend on what you shot it on, like what camera you shot it on, how good the codec that your camera shoots is. There's a bunch of just contextual driven things that you'll run into when you're working on green screen footage. But generally you can create a nice key if you focus solely on the mat itself and then use the mat to key your image rather than the keyer itself. All right, so we have a pretty good looking mat here. There's a couple other little things that I'm gonna do. Let's go ahead and look at this on our final result. And let's put our black back behind this. And let's just go in and look at some of the edges around like the collar area, the hair, anywhere like that. We're just paying attention to some of these edges. So I think we might be able to clean them up a little bit with some of these additional parameters like clip rollback, screen shrink or grow. So one thing that you can do with your green screen is you can shrink the edges a little bit. So I'm gonna shrink the edges by like a couple of pixels, and you'll notice that a lot of those like little gray fringy edges have now gone away. So this key is gonna look, what was that?
Especially on the legs.
Yep, especially on the legs. So that's going to help a little bit. One thing you want to kind of keep in mind when you're doing any of this green screen work is less is generally more. Like if you really need to push something a long way to get the key to work, you're probably going to run into issues in other ways. So just a little bit of shrink and grow, and then let's do just a little bit of screen softness as well. I'm going to do 1 pixel screen softness, and that'll just soften the edges up a little bit so that it's not a super duper harsh key. That's another thing that you can pick off really quickly on poorly keyed green screen footage is the edges will look really sharp and stark, and they don't look natural. So making sure that you get good natural looking edges that work with your footage is going to be really important. Screen D-spot black and white, I don't really use those very often. They can just help kind of alleviate some of the like spotting issues that you might see in your keys. So let's just test out the D-spot black and set that to like 5. Yeah, it's really not doing anything for us. I'm gonna leave those alone. I generally don't play with those too much. And then the replace method, I want to set the replace method to none.
There's like a blur on the edges.
Where?
I saw a little bit of a blur on the...
Like around her neck?
Yeah, something like that?
Yeah.
Like over here? And over
yeah,
here?
Like that. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Or was that just part of the image?
I believe that's part of the image.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a pretty solid key. I mean, then you can kind of tell it's working because like there's this stray hair on her collar, and you can actually see the hair
Yeah, I can see
in the
that.
pixels right there, which is, I mean, that's generally pretty good. And remember, like when we put this on a background, we're not going to be in that close, looking at the edges that close. So sometimes you don't want to overwork it and be super duper nitpicky about edges and like making sure all that stuff's going to work. Take a less is more approach to it. Don't push the parameters farther than you have to, and then you can always tweak when you need to when you move forward. So this is looking pretty good. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to fix the feet and the bottom of this image so that we can get rid of all this noise down here. Just don't pick up your phone, bro. It's not hard. All right. Let's see. It's 6:30. Why don't we take a 10-minute break and come back? Here we go. Okay, so we are going to work Leah's screen mat to get rid of the shadows. Get rid of the shadows and the stuff going on in the feet area because we want to be able to use this whole image. So the next thing we're going to do, so like I said before, I personally like to utilize the mat a lot when I'm doing green screen stuff. I did this on the Deja Vu project a lot, where it's just usually it's easier and cleaner to create a good black and white mat than it is to use Keylight to do all the keying, specifically for stuff like this. Like if we use this as it stands right now, we can go in, we can make a bunch of masks down here to clean all this stuff up and make it work better. But I think if we just create a good mat for this, it'll work better than it would if it was just Keylight. So let's see how to do that. Go ahead.
Can you try flags, please?
Yes, sir. We can absolutely do that. Thank you, Riley. I appreciate that.
Yeah, welcome, teacher.
They need to get a new bulb in that thing so that people can actually see it. Yeah, hit more of them, Riley. There's a couple more.
Don't
Other one.
usually hit this one.
There it is. There it is.
Good job, bro.
Now that the room is fully dark, we can actually move forward. All right. So we are going in and we are going to fix all this stuff up down here. All right. So like I said, we want to create a mat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Leah green screen PNG and I'm going to duplicate it. And then I am going to name this Leah_mat. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pre-compose this mat. So we're going to right-click and we're going to say pre-compose.
How do you duplicate it?
Command D to duplicate. We're gonna pre-compose and we're gonna move all attributes into new composition. And this can just be called Leah Mat. That's fine. Leah Mat. We'll just call it 01 to differentiate it from the other layer name.
Yeah, Matt.
Leah Mat, MATTE 01. All right, so now we have a new layer. We're gonna go into that composition. So I double clicked on the Leah Mat composition and it looks the same as what we had in there from before. And so what we're gonna do here is we are going to create a black and white mat, and we're gonna clean up all the junk on the bottom of this image so that we can see her shoes and not any of the like wrinkles and shadows and things going on the bottom part of the screen. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set my Leah Mat layer to screen mat, and that's gonna give us our black and white mat layer. Right, so then what we want to do here is we just want to get rid of all the junk around her shoes, and we want to make sure that the area inside her shoes is a nice clean white, so that there's none of this extra detail going on inside of here where we can see like the laces and all that stuff. And it looks like there's some other things that we can tweak here too. So I'm going to go back into my screen mat and I'm going to clip the white a little bit more so that we can get rid of those other little spots that I'm seeing inside of the white mat. And what we will then do is we're going to create a new layer. So we're going to go layer, new, solid. And this is going to be a white solid. You got to make sure that it's 100% white, right? So there should be no black in this. Go all the way up in the upper left-hand corner and make sure that you got a pure white solid, and we're gonna click OK. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that white solid layer. I'm pushing T for opacity, and I'm going to set that white solid layer to 50% opacity so that I can see through it, so that I can use my pen tool to kind of to clean up all those areas that I was talking about. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you do that again?
Which part?
Um,
I'm going in on my white solid, and I'm going to start creating a mask in here for my white solid around all these areas of Leah's shoe that have the spill in them or the gray in them, so that we can see only what we want to see on the shoes down there, so we're not seeing any alpha through them. So I'm just drawing around kind of the edge where we can see that stuff, and then I'm just going to go ahead and close the mask up over there. And if I turn that to 100%, you'll notice that all that stuff inside of her shoe goes away, and we have a much cleaner version of her shoe now. So I'm going to set that back to 50%, and I'm actually going to turn my mask off for right now, so you guys watch this part real quick, right? So when I'm working on, so we have the other shoe to do, right? And we can use this same layer for it. I'm going to shut this mask off. I'm going to just, where it says add, I'm going to set it to none so that I can see the rest of the white. And I'm going to go in and just going to create another mask around this other shoe. And then we'll set both of those masks back to add, and then we'll only see the areas of the shoe that we want to see. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Here we go. So I'm just creating my second mask now. I have my white solid selected, and I'm creating a new mask inside of my white solid, just kind of around the edges of the shoe. I'm kind of clicking and then clicking and dragging depending on what I need my mask to do. And we'll go all the way around kind of the interiors of her shoes real quick. And here's the other thing to just note about this. Like, we're doing a still. You would have to do this if this was video. Like, if this was video, you'd have to go in and actually roto around all this stuff to clean it all up and make it work. Okay, I got my second mask made. I'm setting both of my masks to add, and now you can see that all the junk inside the shoes is all gone.
how did you
Do what,
do
DeAndre?
that? Add part?
So I just turned my first mask off by setting it to none. And I'm just turning my masks back on to make sure that they're both working on that layer. So if I solo this layer, this is what you see. You just see the interiors of her shoes that we filled in. Recording. Okay, so now we're going to do this with the dark areas of this image. So let's create a new solid. So layer new solid. We want to make a black one. Black solid. We want to make sure it's 100% black, so it should say 00000 all the way across. And then click OK, and click OK. And then again, we're going to set our transparency to 50%. I mean, honestly, you could just set this to opacity, whatever, same thing. You could honestly, you know, do this with zero transparency. You don't really need the transparency. You just need to be able to see kind of where the garbage is in your image, so that you can get rid of it. So I'm kind of gonna do basically from like here down. I'm gonna go in and just do a rough mask around this to get rid of as much of this junk as possible. And I'm gonna kind of get a little closer to the edges of her shoe down here so that we can clean this stuff up as much as possible. Same idea again, just close is pretty much gonna be good enough here. Some areas where it gets lighter, like right here, we need to maybe get a little closer to the edge of the shoe, but we wanna make sure that the edges of the shoe don't get sharpened too much. So we're just gonna do this kind of quick and dirty. I can see the edge of the shoe right here, so I'm gonna leave this little shadow kind of play here. I think that could actually work in our favor. So I'm gonna kind of go around this and just draw out as much of this garbage as possible. This is what's called garbage matting. So you're getting rid of all the junk in the image that you don't need. million furious clicks, which is great. Going around her shoe again, just kind of getting this as close as I can. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Close will be good enough. Looks pretty good. Then if I crank up my transparency, you can see that I now have a nice clean mat. So that is the goal. This is what you want to see when you're done. You want just a nice, clean black and white mat. I left a little bit of the shadow in around her shoe because I think it might help us out a little bit. DeAndre, you don't want to cut her laces off, dude.
What do you say?
You don't have to go back. Just keep going. You just don't want to. Just don't do it in the future. Yeah, Command Alt Z to redo.
Once you're done with the key, or once you're done with the pen tool, then what?
File, edit, redo. Oh, Shift Alt Z. Never mind. There you go, dude. See that? Look at that. Shift Alt Z like crazy. Sorry, Peter. What was your question?
Once you're done with the key, once you're done with the pen tool, then what do you do?
So you got it like what I got right now?
Yeah. No.
So I just turned the opacity of my black solid back up so that I can see what's been cleaned out. And then probably the other good thing to do here is to just add a little bit of a feather to your mask. So like maybe give it like a 1.5 pixel feather. It'll just soften the edges of it a little bit. What's not working?
I didn't do it right.
6. So you should have something similar to what I've got right here with the mask. The whole idea here is just to get a good clean, oh, that was funky, a good clean black and white mat like what we see right here. So the way that we use this is if we go back, so I'm pushing tab here to go back to our original Leah green screen image. We can see that we've got the mat and we've got the Leah green screen PNG. So we can actually, what we can actually do here is we can delete the key light from the Leah green screen PNG. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. And then what we want to do is we want to set on the Leah green screen PNG, we want to toggle switches and modes, which is that little switch down at the bottom that we've worked with before, right? This guy right here. Toggle switches modes, and then we want to set this to LumaMatte. And then you'll notice this is what we get. Then the last step that I like to do that really helps out anything that you're going to do, any kind of keying work, and using this, so you can see that there's a whole bunch of spill in her shoes, right? So if you look, that's why we had to go in and matte out her shoes. Yeah, go ahead. Right here, so it's you toggle switches and modes, and then set it where it says track matte. Set that to LumaMatte, and you have to make sure that your black and white layer is above the layer that you're working on. So you got to set it on the green screen layer itself, and then that shouldn't be visible. If it's visible, it'll look like this. If it's not visible, it'll look like that. Yeah, go ahead, Connor.
Did you tell us to delete our key light?
What was that? Yeah, delete key. So because we're using the mat, right? We're using the mat to do the keying. So here's Leah's green screen image that we started with. I deleted key light, and then I set the mat to LumaMatte. So we're using key light to create a mat to key our image.
Nothing's happening.
Let me look at your screen, sir. Number 16.
Why is it selecting the layer?
Hold on. Chillax, bro. What are you trying to do?
I fixed it.
Yeah, you're good, man. You're good. Go ahead, Adam. What's up? You got messed up too? What number are you? 15. Oh, okay. So, oh, hold on a second. Oh, you didn't pre-comp, dude. You're supposed to pre-comp. So here's what we got. Let's take these guys right here. Let's get rid of this.
Am I having the same issue as he has?
Okay, hold on a second. Let me look at this for just a second. So white solid. We don't need this solid. Let's no track mat this right now. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so there's our key image that we're going to key, and then you've got your Leah mat over the top of that. Okay, so these 3 layers need to be pre-composed. Pre-composed, and then we're going to call this Leah underscore mat. And I'm going to pause. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to apply the spill suppressor. So you can see that we've got green spill in our shoes down here, and the advanced spill suppressor does a really good job of getting rid of all of that spill. So I'm taking the advanced spill suppressor and I'm just plopping that on Leah's layer, and you'll notice that spill goes away and now it looks the way that it should, right? So there's before and after, right? Green spill, no green spill. And that's generally how I use key light to make mats and keys. Now if you shoot and light on a green screen really well and you're shooting like waist up, where you don't have any like interaction with the green screen down below and you don't have shadows and wrinkles and all that stuff, then you can just usually use key light out of the box to pull a key that'll work. But when you have stuff like this that you need to go in and clean up and make it look nice, this method works really, really well, where you use the screen mat, you create a good black and white mat, and then you use that mat to key your image and you can make it look nice and clean like this. And all right, so I'm going to try to track this nose in Mocha. So what we're going to do is we're going to track our actor's nose, and then we're going to make Leah attached to the actor's nose. Or maybe we could make Leah come out of her nostril. I'm sure Leah will love that. All right, so this is, I don't know if this is going to work, because last time I tried this, it didn't work too well. So we'll give it a shot and see what happens. So we're going to track in Mocha AE. And so this is 2018. In 2019, Mocha is all contained within After Effects, which is really nice. The older versions, it actually opens up another program outside, and it kind of does this in the new version too, but we'll just see if we can get this to work. Nose track, that looks good. Let's click OK on that. All right, so it gives you the video. And then generally the way this works is you create a spline shape around what you want to track, right? So we want to track her nose. There we go. And because we're only using motion tracking data here, we're not using any of the roto data, we should just be able to track this and then make some minor adjustments and then move forward. If we'll actually, I'm gonna back up here a little bit. I'm gonna trash this one. And I'm just gonna create a spline right around this nostril, because that'll give us good data, good tracking data. So we're gonna go zoom in here a little bit, Z to zoom in, and I'm just gonna set up a tracking spline right around her schnoz. And then I'm going to select all of those, and I'm just going to soften the selection a little bit. And then we're going to go ahead and track this forward. So there's a bunch of little things inside of Mocha that you can monkey around with. So because this is a 4K image, I don't need it to use 90% of the pixels. I'm going to set that to 50%. This will increase the speed at which with which it tracks. It's tracking luminance right now, so it's looking at the dark and light areas of the image to track what we need to track, and it's tracking translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective. For this, we probably really only need translation and scale, but we'll see what happens. We can throw away data that we don't need. I'm going to have it track all that stuff right now and go through the whole thing, and then we'll make adjustments and we'll go from there. Mocha is also a very powerful rotoscoping tool. You can use this to roto pieces of the images. Like if I wanted to come in here and give her lip makeup, I could track her lips and then go in and use that RotoShape data from Mocha to like colorize her lips if I wanted to, or do certain things to certain areas of the image. Can work really, really well. So I'm going to go ahead and start tracking this forward, and we'll see how it goes. And it looks like it's moving pretty quickly, which is good. We're not using a large amount of the pixels inside of this image, which is a good thing. If you're tracking very large pieces of the image, it's going to take a lot longer amount of time for it to do its tracking. This looks really solid. The reason I really like Mocha is because it does a really, really good job with motion, and it tracks a lot of different data for you at the same time. And it has kind of like an artificially intelligent tracker, whereas if you go in and you make adjustments, it looks at the entire timeline and adjusts the entire timeline for whatever adjustments you do on keyframes. So generally the way that this works is you track the whole thing, and then you go back and you do specific keys. So if we were trying to, say, track her lips, for instance, like we'd probably want to do the top lip and the bottom lip. That way if she talks or she opens her mouth, we can track both of those lips, right? But this is looking like it's creating really good data for us, and we won't need to really adjust it too much.
If you did track her lips and she pursed her lips or something, would you have to go in there and adjust it?
You definitely have to go in and adjust it. It would do a pretty good. It would probably do a pretty good job straight away, but you would certainly have to go in and adjust it and help the roto out. So this is going to give us really good motion tracking data. For just doing like general motion tracking, Mocha works really, really well. Like if you want to say, put some tracking dots on a wall and then track a logo up onto the wall or something like that, Mocha's really good at stuff like that. You can track those those dots really easily. It'll do perspective too, so you can actually move the camera around in perspective, and will track perspective at the same time. It's a planar tracker, so it works on areas of like planar data, so flat parts of the image. It works really well on. Go ahead, Connor.
How did you start, get to the tracking area?
Get here?
Yeah.
What tool do we use?
I selected the footage that I wanted to use, and then I went up to animation and went down to track in Mocha AE. You can see how well it's tracking the perspective of her nostril. See that? Like it actually, like when she flared her nostril, the tracker opened up a little bit. When the nostril translated, it's tracking all that data right now as a plane, which worked really well. We really only need scale and position for this, for what we want to do. Okay, so we have our roto, which looks like it did a pretty good job throughout most of the... Yeah, here, this was really impressive to me. Like, she flares her nostril a little bit here, and it tracked that nostril flare, which is really nice. Okay, cool. So we'll see how this goes from here. So it did a pretty good job. I'm not really going to adjust this. I'm just going to move forward because we're going to use some of the other tools inside of After Effects. There's some motion trackers inside of After Effects that you can use to do your motion tracking. But I just wanted to see if I could get this to work. So I'm going to export this motion tracking data. I'm going to go export tracking data. And I want transform data, position, scale, and rotation. That's what I want. And I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. And then I'm going to save this so that I have my Mocha saved, and I'm going to go back over to After Effects. So here I am back in After Effects, and then what I need to do is I need to create a new null object, and then I'm going to paste my motion data onto the null object. And you'll notice the null object's moving all over the place with my character. So it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, it looks like. Yep, that looks pretty good. So now we've got this motion tracking data, and I want to put Leah on her nose. Oh, let's put Leah on her nose. This is going to be so funny. All right. So then I'm going to bring Leah in and scale her down a bit.
Honey, I shrunk the kid.
And then what we'll do is we'll kind of position Leah where we want to position her for where we're going to track her into her nose. So let's just... get her right in there. And then I'm going to actually give it a little rotation. So I'm going to rotate. I'm going to change the anchor point too. So I'm going to move the anchor point to Leah's head. And then I'm going to rotate. I know, Leah, you're going to lose your mind at me. when you see that I'm making you hang out of a woman's nose. But you weren't here to argue, so I apologize in advance. All right, so I have Leah kind of like put in the image where I like it, and then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Leah's green screen image and I'm going to parent that to the null. And then if we play this back,
Oh my god.
we should see that it tracked pretty well to the nostril, which is nice. So I'll go ahead and play this back so we can see what this looks like. You can see there's a little bit of weird scaling stuff going on, so we could probably lose the scale data.
I said the tip of her nose, not her nostril.
Liar.
Liar.
So you can see that worked pretty well. Mocha does a really good job of motion tracking. If we wanted to get rid of this problems with the scaling, we could just delete the scale data. So I'm going to go back to the first keyframe and then just delete out the scale data and then replay this. And now it's just the position data that we're getting. There we go. We've got Leah hanging out of our actor's nose.
Just record that for 5 minutes.
Please do.
I'm not going to record this for 5 minutes. All right, so let's actually use After Effects' motion tracker to do something similar, and we'll make this happen with a different tracker. All right, so there's one instance. So let's, you guys all have this file, right?
Yes.
So let's take that file nose track and let's dump it onto a new composition. So grab nose track and then bring it down under the little composition icon in the lower left hand corner of the project window and let go, and it'll create a new composition with the proper frame rate and the size of the video. I would highly recommend, yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that process again?
Is it the video?
Nose track the video and drop it onto this little icon right here.
Which icon? Oh, that icon.
This icon right here, create new composition icon. So what that does is it creates a composition with the proper frame rate and aspect ratio and resolution. DeAndre, look at my screen. This
It's
icon
not
right
there,
here,
man.
it's there. I know it's there.
No, I mean the what? Oh, wait, here it is. There
It's not there. I know it's
What he was
there.
talking about, I had the same problem.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it wasn't there, man. Like.
Okay, I forgive you. Moving on. All right. So nose track. We're going to track the nose of this footage. I would highly recommend that you set this to 25% and 1/4. This is 4K footage. It's heavy. It's about a gigabyte of footage for 14 seconds. So you want to make sure that we're not making the machine work too hard here. So set it to 1/4, 25%, and now it should play back relatively smoothly. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to track this. We're going to track our nostril, and we're going to use After Effects' built-in tracker for this. So click on the nose track video in the timeline, right-click, and go to where it says Track and Stabilize, and say Track Motion, and that will pull up the tracker dialog over on the right-hand side. Is everybody with me?
Yep.
Connor can't take it.
Cool. Okay. So we're
How do you get to the...
we are tracking motion. So After Effects has a bunch of built-in motion trackers, camera trackers, and stuff like that. So this one we just want to track position data on. If we wanted to say track rotation on this, we'd need to have 2 dots, right? 2 points that we could track rotation on. I'm not going to really worry about trying to track the rotation of this. We're just going to track the position of it. So let's grab our little tracker and let's just expand it a little bit. So try to grab the corners and just expand the tracker so that you can actually see something like that on your screen. Did it work for everyone? Were you able to expand the tracking areas? Okay, so then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take that tracker over and we're going to position it on our nostril.
How do you move it?
Just click and drag, baby. Click and drag. Got to click inside the box. So you should see, like, you should look at my screen, Riley. You should see a little arrow with the little crosshairs on it.
Got it.
Like that. Yeah.
Everybody get it? Everybody make it work? Are we there? Did we do it?
We got a
Great.
Oh, I can see those hairs.
I can see those hairs. Very good. Okay, so because I was looking at DeAndre's screen. All right.
Here we go again.
Okay, here we go. All right, so things you need to know about the motion tracker. The bigger the tracker is, the longer it's going to take to track whatever you're tracking. The inside box is the feature center, right? That's what it's looking at. That's what it wants to find for tracking. The outside box is the look-ahead box, right? So it's looking in that outside box to see where the stuff in the inside box is going to be in the next frame, right? So generally, if there's a lot of movement in your footage or in your on the piece of data that you're tracking, you want to have that outside box big enough so that it doesn't move outside of that. Otherwise, if it does do that, what's going to happen is it's going to lose the track. It'll just stop tracking. It'll track whatever happens to be inside the box in that frame. So we want to make sure that outside box is just a little bit bigger than the inside box, and we're just going to tighten that inside box up and make it like fit right around her nostril like so. I do know that like further down the line she starts to move around quite a bit, so I'm making this a little bit bigger than I probably need to, but we're just going to start tracking it with the way it is right now, and we'll see what happens. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink it down, and then when we get to that spot, we'll back up a little bit and retrack if we need to. Is everybody ready? This is the fun part where we watch the computer work. All right, so once you have your tracking points set up, go ahead over here into the tracker module and click Analyze Forward. So I'm just clicking the play button, basically, and playing this forward, and it's going to start tracking the tracker. Or it's going to start tracking your nostril.
Where's Analyze Forward?
It's right here.
Uh-oh.
See, you just lost it, DeAndre. You didn't make the outside box big enough.
Oh, that's what happened. Okay.
So it's moving pretty slow. It's almost through 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording so that you don't have to watch this tracker work. Like I was saying, you can stop and start and control your tracking as it goes with this outer box, the look-ahead box. If things are going too slow, you can kind of shrink that outer box in a little bit and it'll make things go faster. You just got to be mindful that you don't lose the track. So we've got about 5 seconds of tracking data on this shot. I'm just going to go ahead and set my work area using N to that 5 second mark, and we should be able to kind of scrub back through this and see that this has done a pretty good job tracking, and we can go ahead and utilize this data. All right, so what we need to do is in our timeline now, we need to create something to paste that data onto. So we're going to make a new layer, a new null object. So we're going to go layer, new, null object. And I explained what a null object is, right, to you guys? So a null object is just an object that you can use as a helper. It doesn't show up in your renders. It's just there to take data and help you do stuff. So we've got a new null object. So we're looking at the layer right now for the tracking data. Let's go back to the composition and you can actually see that your null object is right there. So we've got our tracking data is kind of contained inside of that layer nose track layer that we have up on top. So to see your tracking data, you need to be on that layer. If you go back to the composition, you won't see any tracking data. So I'm going to go back to that nose track layer. I'm going to make sure that I click on my motion tracker that I'm working on, which will light up the tracking rollout on the right-hand side. And now what we need to do is we need to tell the tracker where we want the data to go. So you need to go to Edit Target. DeAndre, watch my screen. You need to go to Edit Target, and then you need to tell it null to. If you've got lots of nulls and crap in your timeline, it won't know where necessarily to put the data. So make sure that says null to, click OK, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and click Apply, and it's going to ask you what dimensions you want to do the X and Y. That's going to give you position for X and Y, and you click OK, and it will have applied that data to your null object. Scott, go ahead.
For the null thing, like motion target, it won't let me.
So we have our null object, and the data is on our null object. And now we want to attach something to her nose. So let's do text this time instead of Leah, so she can feel a little less embarrassed. We'll just use her name. How about that?
No,
How about
that-
Leah
that makes-
was
that makes it
here?
worse.
There we go. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab a piece
killing
of
her, man.
text that's readable. So I want this to have a fill on it, and I don't necessarily need it to have a stroke. There we go. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna track the text Leah was here with an arrow. I need something a little bolder than that. That's better. All right, so we got Leah was here. We're gonna go ahead and put that text right there. And then we're also gonna create a shape layer. A little arrow shape layer. Leah, if you're watching this, I'm not picking on you. I do really like you as a person.
She's gonna destroy you though.
It just so happened that you weren't here today, and it all went awry. All right, so we got our little arrow here. Oh, I totally made a mask instead of a shape layer. That's my bad. Let's try that one more time. So I'm just gonna make sure that my fill is set to black, and we're gonna make a little shape layer that is an arrow. There we go. It works now. Leah was here. And now I've got my shape layer, which is an arrow. And then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna kind of like set this up so that it all works. You having trouble over there, DeAndre?
My text is weird for some reason.
Just not cooperating, huh?
No, it is not.
So we've got our null object and our shape layer, and we're gonna go ahead and set this up. I'm just gonna point at her face so it's not right at her nostril.
You are just so killing it, man.
All right, so we've got these two layers, and we want to basically allow them to be tracked to this motion data. So all we need to do here is parent these two layers to our null object. So I select these two layers, and then all I do is parent them to the null, and now if we play this back, it will track to said layer.
This one was on the tip of the nose.
And it looks pretty good. We'll watch it in real time. Real time. Sort of real time. Oh, I have this set to full, which is probably my first mistake. Set this to quarter and it will play back proper. So there you go. That is one of the types of motion tracking that you can do inside of After Effects. So additionally, you can do things like track rotation and scale and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So I'm tempted to give this a shot on like the corners of her mouth to see if we can make that work. So let's give this another shot and do another track here. So I'm going to go back into my nose track layer, and I'm going to create a new tracker. So I'm pulling up the tracker over here, and I'm going to do track motion. This time, so I've got, and it's called Tracker 2 this time. This time I'm going to do position and scale, and you'll notice that it gives you 2 trackers instead of 1, right? So I'm going to do kind of the similar thing that I did last time. I'm going to scale these up a little bit so that I can see them. And I'm going to place one on one corner of her mouth and one on the other corner of her mouth. And I'm going to try to scale these down quite a bit because this will, again, now it's tracking 2 points, so it's got more stuff to track, and she moves around quite a bit, so I'm going to try to see if this will work. All right, so I've got the Tracker 1 and the Tracker 2 set up on the corners of her mouth, and I'm going to start analyzing forward, and just be ready to stop this because it could get lost pretty quickly, and we might have to back up and redo a little bit of the tracking data. So I'm going to go ahead and play this forward. It's going to start tracking. I'm just going to be paying attention to this, making sure that I'm not losing anything. Especially when she starts talking. So far, so good. Okay, yep, there it got a little hinky. I'm gonna just increase the look ahead boxes a little bit, and we're gonna start stepping forward one at a time just to make sure we don't lose anything. Okay, still looks good. So now you notice that I'm just stepping ahead one frame at a time. And it looks like I'm probably through the worst of it. So I'm going to go ahead and push play again, and I'm just going to monitor this to make sure that we get good tracking data. Still really solid. Oop. So I stopped it there because we kind of lost the corner of our mouth. So I'm going to back up a couple frames. And then I'm just going to step it forward. So this part's important to watch. So if you're having trouble making a track work, sometimes you need to go frame by frame and you need to help it out, right? So I'm going to step forward one at a time, and I'm watching this tracker over here on the right-hand side. So I really want this to stay on the corner of her mouth. So I'm just going to track this forward one step at a time and make sure that my tracker stays where it's supposed to be. And it looks like we're back in action again. This is going to create some really weird data because her mouth's going to be changing shape and size, and it should be interesting to see what we get. Okay, again, I'm still just stepping through one frame at a time, making sure things stay where they're supposed to be. I'm going to back up one frame and just scoot this tracker a little bit. Step forward again. Okay, and again, I lost a bit of data right there, so I'm just going to step forward and then help it out. So I want to make sure that it stays in the corner where it's supposed to be. The other one looks like it's in pretty good shape. So still just clicking forward one at a time. And I think I'm going to go ahead and push play now, and if anything funky happens, I'll just fix it. It's not perfectly in the corner there, but it's pretty dang close. It looks like we're going to get back out to where we need to be. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to just shrink my look ahead boxes down a little bit so we can finish up the 5 seconds. Boom. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and push stop. Now we've got data for this new tracker. I'm going to create a new null for this. So new null object. And I'm going to actually label this one this time. We're going to call this mouth track null. Click OK. The other one's going to be called nose track null. And we'll go back over here. So we got the mouth track null. It's looking good. I'm going to go back over to my nose track data, and I'm going to go ahead and edit the target, make sure that it's on the mouth track null, and then click OK. And I'm going to say apply my data, X and Y. And now we should have new data for that null object. And it looks like it worked really, really well in terms of the track. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create another piece of text. We're going to call this mouth. And I'm going to make this nice and big and bold. Really? That's bold. There we go. Mouth. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to rotate this. Oops. Rotate this so that it looks like it's kind of in the proper orientation of her mouth. And so now again, remember, we're getting rotation data out of this, we're getting scale data out of this, and we're getting position data out of this as well. So I'm going to scale this up just a little bit as well, and then I'm going to go ahead and parent that to my null object. And then we're going to go ahead and play this forward and see what happens. And it's rendering full. I don't need it full. Like this quarter is plenty. So you can see this really nicely tracked the rotation, the scale, all that good stuff for her mouth. That worked really, really well. It even like scales nicely when she opens and closes her mouth. That works pretty good. Cool. So there's the second type of tracker. There's a couple more trackers inside of After Effects. There's a 4-corner tracker, which is really, really handy for tracking like screens and stuff like that if you need to do screen replacements. That seems to work really, really well for screen replacements. We can take a peek at that one too. I actually have footage for that. Let me dig back in here and see if I can find that real fast. It's gonna be over here in one of these. Somebody's got one of these. Oh, here we go, right here. 4 seconds, perfect. 199 megs. All right, here, I'm gonna send you guys some more footage to play with. So let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 8, 9, 11, and 12. Did Ethan leave?
Hello.
Oh, he did not. Excellent. Okay, and then Adam is at 15, 16, 17, 20, 21, blah, 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 blah. I want to copy. And I want to copy this to all of you guys. All right, so that is copying. I will pause this. So I'm going to do a quick test in Mocha to see if I can do a 4-corner track on this screen. So this shot is pretty simple. There's not a lot of motion to this. But there's a little bit of parallax, and you can use Mocha to create some good tracking data for you, so that you could basically replace this screen if you needed to. So let's give that a shot and see what happens.
Oh boy.
So I'm clicking on my footage, and I'm going to say animation, track in Mocha AE, and it is opening yet another instance of Mocha for me, which is fun. And let's go over here. We don't need to register, and it should pop the footage in. We're going to go ahead and click desktop here, choose. Okay. All right. So we have our footage in again inside of Mocha. And we're going to go ahead and create a roto shape. So this time I'm going to try to be a lot more precise than I was last time. I'm gonna get right in here and track as closely as I can to the edges so that I can use that data to replace the screen itself. And instead of exporting position data, I'm going to export 4-corner pin data, which will allow us to take an image and track it into that screen pretty easily. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. So I'm just going to use the X-Spline tool again. I'm using Z to zoom in and zoom out. And I'm going to get right in here and make sure that I'm pretty spot on with where my points are going to go. And then I right click to get out of the tool, and then I'm going to come back into these corners and just pull these corners tight. And that looks like it's in pretty good shape. Cool. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to use, it says I'm going to use just 20% of the pixels, it looks like. That should be fine for what I am doing. And then we'll go ahead and track this bad boy. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and hit track forward, and it's going to start tracking forward. this should do a really good job straight away. Like, I really shouldn't have to do too much to this track because the camera's moving really slowly. I should probably make sure that it gives me perspective data. So I'm going to go back and make sure that I get perspective data in there too. So hurry up and wait.
Quick question.
Yeah, shoot.
So let's say if she moved into the screen.
Fixing all of these nodes to make sure that they look right. So I've done the track already. And now I'm just going to kind of step back through here and see if there's any little bits of this that I need to fix on top of it. So you can see, like, this is the cool thing about Mocha. I fixed what was at the end, and it applies that to the whole track, which is really nice. So you don't generally need to do as much per keyframing, or per frame keyframing is what I'm trying to say. This one looks like it needs to move a little bit to the left. Looks pretty good. I'm just gonna come through here and check this one more time, make sure everything looks good. Looking pretty good. All right, so then the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to pull up this tool right here, which is the Show Planar Surface tool. And then I'm gonna set these into the corners of my screen. Oops, don't want to move the key, just want to move the planar surface thing. There we go. Cool. Okay, that looks pretty dang good. All right, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to export my data. So I'm going to say export tracking data, and I want After Effects corner pin, supports motion blur, this one. So I got that, and I'm going to say copy to clipboard. And then this works a little bit different. So now what we're looking for is, instead of applying this to a null, we're going to actually apply it to a piece of video. So it just so happens that I have the video that needs to go into those boxes, which is this video actually. So we're going to take this video. The reason I'm choosing this video is because that screen is a 4:3 screen. And this will take any square or rectangular piece of video and squash it into the four corners. So if it's not the proper aspect ratio, it won't look correct. So I'm going to bring the buff male in there and drop him in and put him in my timeline, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply my data, and it didn't work. Of course it didn't work. Let me think. I need to remember how the hell this is supposed to work. Okay, now I remember. Okay, so this is the other kooky thing about the old Mocha. So in order for this to work correctly, whatever you're applying this data to needs to have the same composition settings as the composition that you're working in. Otherwise, all the data will look off. So in order to get this to work, here's what we need to do. All we're going to do is take this, we'll call this the screen replacement video. Take our screen replacement video, and we're going to just dump it on a new composition to make a composition of the same size and proportions. And then we're going to delete the video and replace it with the buff male spin footage. And then what we're going to do is we're going to scale this guy up, and we're going to do something kind of unorthodox here. We're going to stretch it so that it fits this comp perfectly. And then we're going to take this new composition that we've created, buff male spin, and we're going to go back to our screen replacement and dump that whole composition on here. What? Why? Why won't you let me do it? Oh, because I named it the wrong thing. Okay. So I screwed up the names, my bad. So screen replacement video is what we're actually dumping in here. So here we go, dumping in the screen replacement video, and now we paste the data, and bada bing, there it is on our screen. Tracked perfectly with perspective and the whole kit and caboodle. So did it work perfectly? I mean, we could probably tweak this a little bit. It did a pretty damn good job.
Oh my goodness. There's a bit of a brain thing going on where he's switching which way he's spinning for me every so often.
Oh, really? Fun.
Oh, I see it too.
It's like, no. What? What is it?
You're funny.
It's not a texture of the TV video, sir?
You don't have this one? The one that's on my screen? You can call me Todd, Ethan. You don't need to call me. You don't need to call me sir, dude. Todd is fine.
It's a
He really likes Mr.
honestly.
No, I don't. Shut up, Mark. There, Leah, if you want to get back at me, just call me Mr. Randall for the rest of class, or Professor Randall
Okay,
if you
Mr.
really want to shine it on.
It's still
Okay, copying it across now.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
I get angry when somebody calls you Randall.
Well, I'm gonna pause this for a minute. Okay, so you guys saw how to do that in Mocha. It's got some kind of convolutedness to it. There's some stupid things that you need to do to make it work right. So we're going to use After Effects' built-in 4-corner pin motion tracker to track the screen and replace the image inside of it. So let's again go into the screen replacement video, right-click on it, and let's go up to Track and Stabilize, and then we're going to say Track Motion. And then inside of the track motion dialog, we're going to change the tracking type to perspective corner pin. So this time it gives you 4 trackers, right? 1 for each corner of whatever you happen to be corner pin tracking. So let's take those trackers and place them in the proper corners. If you need to increase the scale of them to grab onto them like we did before, feel free to do so. DeAndre, did you just say you're lost?
No. Maybe.
Bro, pay attention. You have the footage, right?
It's right here.
Okay, so right-click on it, say Track. Why won't you let me move you, you bitch? All right, so you're going to say Track, and then you're going to change the tracking type to perspective. Are you looking at my screen? Look at my screen. So you're going to say Track Motion like we did before, and then you're going to change the tracking type to perspective corner pin. And you're going to put the 4 trackers in the 4 corners. Does that make sense? Yeah, they might get a little stuck. You might need to move them one at a time. So you know, just work with it. They shouldn't get too badly stuck.
What if like they're just like not moving to where they're supposed to go?
Try moving them one at a time, and switch to the different ones until they start doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay, he has a problem.
Oh, DeAndre.
You're about to say Mr. Randall.
Mr. Randall, man.
Oh, I am so not going to help you if you do that to me.
Yeah, we are doing that too.
DeAndre, stop.
Raleigh.
Okay,
We've been recording this whole
DeAndre.
time. Oh my god.
Track motion. Are you watching? Watch your screen. I'm trying to help you, dude. Track motion. Track type. Perspective corner pin. Place the trackers in the corners. All right. So you should, once you're there, you should have something similar to what I've got here. And because there's not a lot of motion, we don't need these outside boxes to be super huge. So only make them as big as they need to be. What you do want is you want to make sure that there's enough inside the middle box so that it knows that it's actually looking at a corner, right? That's important.
Like, are we trying to get the corner of the green or the corner of, like, inside the screen?
Corner of the screen. So kind of like, just eyeball it. Close is going to be good enough on this thing. We're not actually using this shot, so just get her close and we should be okay.
How do I add that tool?
Add what tool?
The trackers.
Right click on the video, track, track motion. Oop, careful. You don't want to move the feature center by itself. There you go, DeAndre. Yep, keep moving that bad boy. Go ahead, Scott.
Can you look at my screen? Mine's messed up.
You bet, sir.
I had a problem getting the corner.
Do it, computer, do it. Do it! Alright, so I have tracked the screen with the 4-corner pin tracker, and now I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the buff male spin video that I want to replace in there. So I'm going to bring in that video, and then we're going to go back into the tracker and we're going to tell it that we want it to put it on, yep, the buff male spin layer. Click OK, and then we're going to say apply. And it totally didn't work.
It totally didn't work.
Totally didn't even work at all.
What do you press to?
Oh wait, no, it did work.
Mine did.
Nope, it worked on the first frame, and then it totally didn't work anymore.
Mine worked.
What do you press to apply it? Wait, where do I?
Oh, I might have screwed up. Hold on a second. Let me see if I screwed this
Position,
up.
rotation, and scale.
Let's try this again. Tracker 1, perspective corner pin, edit target, male spin layer, click OK, apply it. Okay. Yeah, I get one good keyframe and then it just flies away. That's weird.
Mine worked.
Did it work for the whole thing?
Yeah.
No,
Did yours fly away like mine did?
it's yeah.
Look at mine.
Weird.
Number 5, eh?
Yeah, Peter's work. So I'm not crazy. It does work. Beautiful. Can I see your tracker real quick? I want to see this. So it's just click on the screen. Yeah, and then okay, that's kind of strange.
Buff thing. Here, how do I apply?
So, what happened here? That's really strange. So Peter's worked perfectly. So Connor, yours did the same mine did, right?
Yeah.
It just wigged out and flew across the screen somewhere?
Yeah.
Fun. Fun. Let's try this again. Compositing options.
Same thing worked.
Weird. I don't understand why this is all wonky. I'm going to try this one more time. Reset.
The same thing applies. You come in.
Oh, there they are.
Something went wrong with that. DeAndre's worked fine too.
Great. So glad to hear it.
First, anyway.
If it gets screwed up, just try again. That's what I'm doing right now. I will be perfectly honest with you. I've had to reset trackers so many times can't even count.
Just delete the motion tracking and try it again.
Yes, sir. Just delete the tracker off of your screen replacement video and try it again. Or you can go into the tracker you already have and just reset it and try it again that way. All right, and let's try this again.
No.
And hopefully it doesn't just fly away like it did before. All right, there it is. Very good. Okay, cool. And this time it did not fly away. Excellent. Yes.
You look at mine, I don't know what happened here.
So that's what you should get, is what's on my screen. Peter got it. Okay, so pretty good overall. We learned how to key stuff tonight. We learned how to use mats tonight. We learned how to use 3 different types of motion trackers and Mocha. Pretty successful. Who needed to be here? All right, so go ahead and make sure you get your corner pin to work, and then you guys are free for the evening. Remember, next week. So here's what I'd like you to do. For those of you that got critique, please spend the week doing a little bit of work on your 3D project, and you can turn that in for a few extra points. If you didn't turn your 3D project in tonight, you probably want to get that done. Turn that in for next week. Those of you that need to bring costumes for next week, please do a good job. Come into something interesting. And don't forget, please and thank you. Also start. Oh, you switched the tracking points up. So you have to make sure 1, 2, 3, 4. That's right.
It ain't working. It did a thing.
It did a thing.
Man, anything badly, you know, I'm gonna kill his family.
Sir, Ethan, I thought you figured this out already. Wait.
Ha! Legitimately.
Not to you.
Good.
I didn't do anything different.
Did it work now, Connor?
Yes.
I know.
Did nothing
Sometimes-
different. You're still recording.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Oh my god! Yay!
That's my name, Riley. Call
No.
bullshit. I call bullshit.
Yeah, that's the end of this lecture.
God, Connor.